Welcome to English Stories, your trusted companion for intermediate English learning through immersive storytelling. I'm your host, Michael Harrison, and today we're exploring 4 thought-provoking narratives that will challenge your B1 and B2 level English comprehension while expanding your vocabulary and cultural understanding. This episode, titled Bridges and Boundaries, examines how people navigate the complex relationships between tradition and innovation, individual desires and social expectations, local customs and global perspectives. Each story has been carefully crafted to incorporate sophisticated grammatical structures, nuanced vocabulary, and contemporary themes that reflect the realities of our interconnected world. Today's narratives will expose you to advanced tenses, conditional constructions, and the kind of expressive language that distinguishes confident intermediate speakers from basic communicators. You'll encounter professional vocabulary, abstract concepts, and cultural references that prepare you for real-world English conversations in academic, business, and social contexts. We'll meet Rachel, a young architect struggling to balance modern sustainability principles with historic preservation requirements. We'll follow Carlos, an immigrant chef whose fusion cuisine challenges traditional restaurant expectations. We'll observe Elena, a remote worker discovering the complexities of digital nomad life in a small Italian village. Finally, we'll join Marcus, a university student whose study abroad experience forces him to confront his assumptions about cultural differences. Each story incorporates multiple layers of meaning, requiring you to draw inferences, understand implied information, and appreciate the subtle ways context shapes communication. These skills prove essential for achieving true fluency in English-speaking environments. Rachel Chen had always believed that architecture should serve both aesthetic and environmental purposes. But her latest commission was testing this philosophy in ways she hadn't anticipated. The Riverside Cultural Center, a beloved 1920s Art Deco building, required extensive renovation to meet modern accessibility standards and energy efficiency requirements. However, the Historic Preservation Committee insisted that any modifications must maintain the building's original character and architectural integrity. The challenge seemed straightforward initially. Rachel's firm had successfully completed similar projects, balancing contemporary functionality with historic authenticity. However, as she delved deeper into the building's specifications and the Preservation Committee's requirements, she discovered that achieving both goals simultaneously would require innovative solutions that pushed the boundaries of conventional renovation practices. The building's stunning facade featured intricate stonework and decorative elements that couldn't be altered without compromising its historical significance. Yet the interior desperately needed updated heating, cooling, and electrical systems that would dramatically reduce energy consumption. Traditional renovation approaches would either destroy the building's character or fail to meet modern sustainability standards. Rachel's breakthrough came during a late-night brainstorming session with her team. Instead of viewing the preservation requirements as obstacles, they began treating them as design parameters that could inspire creative solutions. They developed a plan that utilized cutting-edge technology to integrate energy-efficient systems seamlessly into the existing architecture. The heating and cooling solution involved installing a geothermal system beneath the building's courtyard, where underground pipes could circulate temperature-controlled fluid without affecting the visible architecture. Smart glass technology would replace the original windows, maintaining their appearance while providing superior insulation and automatic light adjustment. However, convincing the Preservation Committee to approve these innovations proved more challenging than developing the technical solutions. Committee members, primarily older professionals with deep attachment to traditional restoration methods, expressed skepticism about integrating untested technologies into a historically significant building. Rachel prepared meticulously for the presentation, creating detailed visualizations that demonstrated how the proposed systems would enhance rather than compromise the building's historical character. She researched similar projects worldwide, gathering evidence that modern sustainable technologies could actually help preserve historic buildings by reducing the environmental stresses that contribute to structural deterioration. The presentation day arrived with considerable tension. Rachel faced a panel of 5 committee members, each representing different aspects of historic preservation: architecture, engineering, cultural heritage, and community interests. Her presentation needed to address not only technical feasibility, but cultural sensitivity and long-term preservation goals. Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel began, we're not proposing to modernize this building despite its historical significance, but because of it. Ladies and gentlemen, Rachel began, we're not proposing to modernize this building despite its historical significance, but rather because of it. These sustainable technologies will ensure that future generations can experience this architectural treasure in its full glory. The committee's questions revealed their primary concerns: reversibility of modifications, visual impact on the building's character, and long-term maintenance requirements. Rachel had anticipated these issues and provided comprehensive responses that demonstrated respect for both preservation principles and environmental responsibility. After 2 hours of detailed discussion, the committee voted to approve Rachel's innovative approach, with the condition that she document the entire process for future reference. The project would serve as a case study for sustainable historic preservation, potentially influencing similar projects nationwide. As construction began, Rachel reflected on how the project had transformed her understanding of the relationship between past and future in architectural practice. Rather than viewing tradition and innovation as opposing forces, she had learned to see them as complementary aspects of responsible design. The completed Riverside Cultural Center became a model for sustainable historic preservation, attracting visitors and researchers from around the world. Rachel's approach demonstrated that respecting the past doesn't require sacrificing environmental responsibility, and that creative problem-solving can bridge seemingly incompatible requirements. Key vocabulary and expressions: commission, official request to design or create something; aesthetic purposes, related to beauty and visual appeal; historic preservation, protecting old buildings and their original character; architectural integrity, maintaining the authentic design and style; delved deeper, investigated more thoroughly; pushed the boundaries, challenged traditional limits; cutting-edge technology, newest, most advanced methods; seamlessly, smoothly, without visible connections; meticulously, with extreme care and attention to detail; feasibility, whether something is possible to achieve; reversibility, ability to undo changes if necessary; complementary, working well together. Carlos Mendoza had immigrated to Toronto 5 years earlier with dreams of opening a restaurant that would showcase the sophisticated fusion of Mexican and Korean cuisines he had perfected during his culinary training. However, his unconventional approach to traditional dishes was encountering resistance from both cultural communities, forcing him to reconsider his assumptions about authenticity and cultural representation in cooking. The concept for his restaurant, Soul Mexico, had emerged from Carlos's personal background. Born in Mexico City to a Korean mother and Mexican father, he had grown up experiencing both culinary traditions intimately. His childhood memories were filled with the aromas of kimchi fermenting alongside pickled jalapenos, and family dinners that seamlessly blended bibimbap techniques with traditional Mexican ingredients. When Carlos finally secured funding and opened his restaurant in Toronto's diverse Kensington Market neighborhood, he anticipated that the multicultural community would embrace his innovative menu. Instead, he discovered that many customers expected authentic Mexican food or authentic Korean food, not the creative combinations that represented his personal cultural heritage. The criticism came from unexpected directions. Some Mexican food enthusiasts argued that incorporating Korean elements diluted the purity of traditional Mexican cuisine. Korean community members expressed concern that his fusion approach misrepresented their culinary heritage by combining it with unfamiliar flavors and techniques. Food critics were similarly divided. While some praised Carlos's creativity and technical skill, others questioned whether fusion cuisine could truly honor both cultural traditions, or whether it inevitably resulted in dishes that satisfied neither community's expectations for authentic flavor profiles. The controversy intensified when a prominent food blogger wrote a scathing review titled "Cultural Appropriation or Cultural Appreciation." The article questioned Carlos's right to blend these cuisines, suggesting that his mixed heritage didn't automatically grant him permission to reimagine traditional dishes from both cultures. Rather than becoming defensive, Carlos decided to engage directly with his critics. He organized community cooking classes where he demonstrated the techniques and explained the cultural significance behind each fusion dish. These sessions allowed community members to understand the thoughtful process behind his culinary innovations and the personal connections that inspire each recipe. During these classes, Carlos shared stories about his grandmother's kimchi recipe, which she had adapted using Mexican chiles when traditional Korean ingredients. During these classes, Carlos shared stories about his grandmother's kimchi recipe, which she had adapted using Mexican chiles when traditional Korean ingredients weren't available in 1970s Mexico City. He explained how his father had learned to make Korean-style corn tortillas that incorporated fermentation techniques from his mother's tradition. Gradually, community members began to appreciate that Carlos's fusion cuisine wasn't an arbitrary mixing of unrelated elements, but rather an authentic expression of his bicultural identity. His dishes told the story of immigrant families adapting traditional recipes to new environments and available ingredients. The breakthrough came when elderly members of both Korean and Mexican communities began visiting the restaurant together, sharing their own stories of culinary adaptation and cultural blending. These conversations revealed that all cuisines evolved through contact with other cultures, and that authenticity was often more complex and fluid than rigid traditionalists acknowledged. Carlos's menu evolved to include more detailed descriptions of each dish's cultural origins and personal significance. He began featuring guest chefs from both communities who demonstrated how traditional techniques could inspire new interpretations without losing their essential character. Within 2 years, Seoul, Mexico had become a gathering place for multicultural families and individuals interested in exploring the creative possibilities that emerged when different traditions encountered each other respectfully. Carlos realized that his role extended beyond simply serving food. He was facilitating conversations about identity, heritage, and the evolving nature of cultural expression in immigrant communities. Key vocabulary and expressions. Sophisticated fusion, complex combination of different styles. Culinary training, education in cooking and food preparation. Unconventional approach, unusual way of doing something. Cultural representation, showing or expressing a culture accurately. Emerged from, developed as a result of. Seamlessly blended, combined smoothly without conflict. Secured funding, obtained money for a business project. Diluted the purity, weakened the authentic character. Scathing review, very harsh criticism. Cultural appropriation, using elements from another culture inappropriately. Arbitrary mixing, random combination without purpose. Bicultural identity, belonging to two different cultures. Elena Rodriguez had embraced the digital nomad lifestyle enthusiastically, believing that remote work would allow her to experience authentic cultural immersion while maintaining her career as a software developer. However, her 6-month stay in the picturesque Italian village of Monterosso was revealing unexpected complexities about the relationship between tourism, technology, and traditional communities. Initially, Elena's arrangement seemed ideal. She had rented a charming apartment overlooking the Mediterranean, established a productive workspace with reliable internet, and settled into what she imagined would be a perfect balance between professional productivity and cultural exploration. The village's stunning scenery provided an inspiring backdrop for her work, and she felt fortunate to escape the constraints of conventional office life. However, within weeks of her arrival, Elena began noticing subtle tensions between the village's traditional rhythms and the influx of remote workers like herself. Local residents, particularly older generations, expressed mixed feelings about the growing presence of digital nomads who brought economic benefits but also contributed to rising housing costs and changing community dynamics. The issue crystallized when Elena learned that her landlord, Signora Benedetti, had evicted a local family to rent the apartment to her at 3 times the previous rate. The family, who had lived in the village for generations, could no longer afford housing in their ancestral community due to the demand from remote workers willing to pay premium prices for scenic locations. This revelation forced Elena to confront uncomfortable questions about her impact on the community she had hoped to experience authentically. Was her presence contributing to the displacement of local residents? Did her ability to work remotely and pay higher rents represent a form of economic privilege that undermined the very cultural authenticity she sought to experience? Elena's concerns deepened as she observed how the village was adapting to accommodate remote workers. Traditional businesses were being replaced by co-working spaces and cafes catering to laptop-carrying visitors. Local restaurants began offering digital nomad packages instead of focusing on regional cuisine. Even the village's ancient piazza was being equipped with additional Wi-Fi access points that disrupted its historical atmosphere. The complexity of the situation became apparent when Elena attended a village council meeting where residents debated the benefits and challenges of the remote work trend. Younger locals appreciated the economic opportunities and international connections that digital nomads brought to their previously isolated community. Older residents worried about losing their cultural identity and the social cohesion that had sustained the village for centuries. Rather than simply leaving to avoid these ethical dilemmas, Elena decided to engage more meaningfully with the community. She began volunteering at the local library, teaching basic computer skills to elderly residents, and helping them connect with family members abroad. She also started learning Italian seriously, moving beyond tourist phrases to engage in substantive conversations about village history and traditions. Elena's most significant contribution came when she proposed creating a cultural exchange program that would benefit both remote workers and local residents. She designed a digital platform that documented village traditions, local artisan techniques, and historical stories, creating an online archive that preserved cultural knowledge while generating income for local experts who shared their expertise. The project evolved into a sustainable model where remote workers contributed both technical skills and financial resources to community preservation efforts, while local residents provided cultural education and authentic experiences that enriched the visitors' understanding of Italian rural life. Through this process, Elena discovered that responsible digital nomadism required more than simply working remotely in attractive locations. It demanded genuine engagement with local communities, awareness of economic impacts, and commitment to reciprocal relationships that benefited both visitors and residents. Her experience in Monterosso transformed her approach to remote work, leading her to develop guidelines for ethical digital nomadism that other remote workers began adopting. Elena realized that technology could either contribute to cultural homogenization or support cultural preservation, depending on how thoughtfully it was integrated into local contexts. Key vocabulary and expressions. Embraced enthusiastically. Accepted with great excitement. Cultural immersion. Deep involvement in a different culture. Picturesque. Visually attractive, like a picture. Constraints, limitations or restrictions. Crystallized, became clear or definite. Premium prices, higher than normal costs. Economic privilege, advantages that come from having money. Displacement, forcing people to move from their homes. Social cohesion, unity and togetherness in a community. Substantive conversations, meaningful, deep discussions. Reciprocal relationships, connections where both sides benefit. Cultural homogenization, making different cultures more alike. Thoughtfully integrated, carefully included in a respectful way. Marcus Thompson had arrived in Seoul for his semester abroad with preconceived notions about Korean culture based largely on K-pop, Korean dramas, and social media representations. However, his actual experience living with a Korean host family was systematically dismantling his assumptions and teaching him profound lessons about the dangers of cultural stereotyping and the complexity of modern Korean society. His host family, the Kims, defied every expectation Marcus had formed about Korean households. Rather than the traditional, hierarchical family structure he had anticipated, he discovered a progressive household where teenage daughter Minji openly debated political issues with her parents, and where both parents shared domestic responsibilities equally. Mr. Kim worked as a freelance graphic designer who often collaborated with international clients, while Mrs. Kim managed a successful online business selling handmade crafts. Their approach to work-life balance challenged Marcus's assumptions about Korean work culture, which he had believed emphasized extreme dedication to corporate employers above personal fulfillment. The family's lifestyle incorporated both traditional Korean values and contemporary global influences in ways that Marcus found unexpectedly sophisticated. They maintained respect for elder family members while embracing progressive social attitudes. They celebrated traditional holidays with modern interpretations that reflected their personal values rather than rigid adherence to historical practices. Marcus's most significant revelation came during Chuseok, the Korean Harvest Festival. He had expected a formal, ceremony-driven celebration based on his research about traditional Korean culture. Instead, the Kim family celebration blended ancestral reverence with contemporary family bonding, including video calls with relatives abroad and fusion dishes that incorporated flavors from Mrs. Kim's travels. Throughout his stay, Marcus began recognizing how his previous understanding of Korean culture had been filtered through Western media representations that emphasized exotic differences rather than universal human experiences. The Korean students he met at university were dealing with familiar challenges: academic pressure, career uncertainty, relationship complexities, and financial concerns that transcended cultural boundaries. His friendship with Minji proved particularly enlightening. She introduced him to aspects of Korean youth culture that existed completely outside the sanitized versions promoted in international media. Young Koreans were grappling with environmental concerns, social justice issues, and economic inequality just as passionately as their counterparts in other countries. Marcus also discovered that many Korean young people felt pressure to conform to international expectations about their culture, often emphasizing traditional elements in interactions with foreigners while living much more diverse, individualized lives in their daily experiences. The experience taught Marcus that authentic cultural understanding required moving beyond surface-level observations and media representations to engage with the lived realities of individual people within their specific social and economic contexts. He learned that every culture contained multitudes of perspectives, lifestyles, and values that couldn't be captured by generalizations or stereotypes. By the end of his semester, Marcus had developed genuine friendships that transcended cultural categories and had gained appreciation for the complex ways that globalization, tradition, and individual choice intersect in contemporary Korean society. Key vocabulary and expressions. Preconceived notions, ideas formed before having real experience. Systematically dismantling, gradually destroying in an organized way. Defied every expectation, was completely different from what was anticipated. Hierarchical structure, organization with clear levels of authority. Work-life balance, healthy relationship between job and personal time. Contemporary global influences, modern worldwide effects. Rigid adherence, strict following of rules or traditions. Ancestral reverence, respect for family members who died long ago. sanitized versions, cleaned up, simplified representations, transcended cultural boundaries, went beyond cultural differences, lived realities, actual daily experiences of real people, intersected, came together and influenced each other. Today's narratives have explored the intricate ways that individuals navigate between tradition and innovation, local expectations and global perspectives, personal identity and cultural belonging. Through Rachel's architectural challenge, Carlos's culinary journey, Elena's digital nomad experience, and Marcus's cultural awakening, we've examined how authentic understanding emerges from engaging thoughtfully with complexity rather than accepting simplified assumptions. These stories demonstrate several sophisticated aspects of B1, B2 level English communication. Notice how each narrative employed advanced vocabulary to express nuanced concepts, used complex grammatical structures to convey multiple layers of meaning, and incorporated cultural references that require contextual understanding beyond basic language comprehension. The linguistic features highlighted throughout these stories reflect the kind of sophisticated expression necessary for meaningful participation in academic discussions, professional environments, and cross-cultural communications. Advanced learners must develop sensitivity to implied meaning, cultural subtext, and the subtle ways that language choices reflect underlying attitudes and assumptions. For continued development at the intermediate level, focus on analyzing how context shapes meaning in complex narratives. Practice expressing abstract concepts using sophisticated vocabulary, and develop awareness of how cultural perspectives influence communication styles and content choices. These stories remind us that language learning, like cultural understanding, requires patience, humility, and willingness to question our preconceptions. Every conversation offers opportunities to deepen our comprehension and expand our capacity for meaningful connection across linguistic and cultural boundaries. Thank you for joining English Horizons. Continue challenging yourself with diverse, complex content that reflects the rich possibilities of advanced English communication.